Let's talk about the shadow self. And again, oh my God, it's just so overused and misused. But let's really understand it. It's important, even if you've never heard the term before, really important to understand it. Some people are going to say the shadow, is equivalent to our evil nature. The shadow is like the devil tempting us. The shadow is the ego. The shadow is evil. So you got to kill it, destroy it, or defeat it. Other people are going to say, oh, the shadow is just our misunderstood self. Like our broken inner child, our abused inner child, and they make it really just a really misunderstood thing that needs to be cuddled. Okay? So those are the two extreme versions of what the shadow is. It's to be, loathed or loved back into submission or whatever. It's to be just honored, given a voice. That's a popular phrase that I hear around following the word shadow. My shadow needs to be given a voice, the shadow self. And people will say, don't deny your shadow self. Don't suppress your shadow self. And they're partly right. But they're still believing that there is a shadow to honor, listen to, or dishonor and kill. Either way, they're, marry it or kill it, back and forth. These two dualities. Now, some of you are going to say, I believe that it needs to be loved, given a voice and loved, and just, cared for and so on. Others are going to be, man, it needs to be dealt with, cut down in its where it stands. I think most people watching this kind of show would go with the one. You need to listen to it, love it, honor it, and that's how you deal with the shadow. Most people today would agree with that, and most people watching a show like this, would agree with that. But to really put it in a different perspective, which they can't both be right. You could say, well, sure, they can both be right. Everything's possible. Yeah, it can both be right that it is needing to be killed and cuddled at the same time. I guess you could kill it and cuddle it while it dies, but no, guys, come on. It's not really, you can't really do both. So which then is right? Just bear with me instead of saying both is right, forget that. If one of them's right, which one is it? The answer is neither of them. Well, if neither of them's right, how did you help us in this talk? Michael's going to talk about the shadow that you should neither kill nor love. Okay, are we done? No. You have to understand what the shadow is before you understand why I'm saying you can't do either polarity of a response, dualistic response. You have to understand what the shadow is. So what is the shadow? Well, it's any dense part of us that stands in front of the light of God and casts a shadow. Think about that. Any dense part. You mean my body? Sure. But I'm also talking about the only way you have a dense body is because you have dense thoughts. Unresolved wounds, judgments, those are what cause our density. So there are densities in me, tensions in my muscles. That's the densest part of my body, besides bone. I have tense muscles become armor, So tense muscles, the light of God is casting upon me. A good metaphor is the sunlight. The sun's casting light, it's just shining light, but the light hits the ground and you go, oh, look, the ground. The grass is getting light. There's light on the trees or whatever, light on the ground. If something stands in the way, you cast a shadow. Now, think about that. How beautiful of a metaphor. The shadow, whether it's one because I'm in the way of the sun or one we call mythological metaphoric shadow, psychological shadow, whichever the case, they're the same. Think about it. It's when I am in the way. It's when dense parts of me, stand in front of the light and cast a shadow. So a shadow is not a cause, is it? It's an effect. The cause of the shadow is me getting in the way. And so what do I do with me for causing the shadow? Well, do I marry it, the me that's getting in the way? Do I kill it? No. I just get the hell out of the way. That's all. If you don't like the shadow being there, get out of the way. So the solution in dealing with a shadow is love the hell out of it. Love the hell out of yourself. Love the densities that are casting the shadow. That's all. Okay, God, that's not that complicated. It's difficult in that, go ahead and try an experiment. Run outside when the sun's out. See your shadow on the ground and then try to not be dense enough to cast a shadow. That's where the work comes in. But to overly emphasize the shadow and shadow work, why is it so popular to say the shadow needs to be killed or married, loved, cuddled? You know why those are popular? Because people make money on them. And they become famous or make money. That's why. Somebody's out there listening to them because the world likes to hear dualistic things. So there'll be a fad that swings this way, people will make money, cash in, then the fad will swing this way, and people will make money and cash in. And it's like, how many people out there are going to say, well, there's this one guy that's teaching how to really, just cut down that shadow. If there's seminars on that, let's pretend in a conference room at a hotel, there's a seminar going on. The people attending that are going to be attending because they're usually religious people, because religious people think of anything that tempts us or seems dark as the devil, and they'll want to kill it. I'm just using metaphors, guys, but that's a more religious type. But spiritual, pop psychology people that want to act like they know a lot more, they're going to say, oh, the shadow is not to be cut down. It's to be loved and embraced. If you just listen to your shadow, you're accepting it and you're owning that it's a part of you, and that makes you a complete person because now you have light, but you have a shadow too. God, that sounds so cool. I mean, so poetic and romantic. It's just really cute, sweet. It's just not true. But their conference room is going to be full of spiritual people, creative people, New Agers. Lots of groups are going to fill that one. Religion in one room and spiritual, creative people the other. Left brain people in one room, right brain people in another room. That's not exact, but it's kind of the way it would be. And if Michael was teaching in a third room how to deal with the shadow, you wouldn't have anywhere near the same number of people. Nowhere near it. The problem would be, one reason, and they shouldn't attend my lecture on it, because it would be over in about 10 seconds. One group would be talking about, watch out for the shadow. The other one would be, embrace, let's talk about our stuff. Let's all stand in a circle and let's own our shadow and let's hold each other. And that's beautiful, embracing the shadow. But over in Michael's room, they're going to go, okay, ready, start. The shadow is when we get in the way and stand in the way of the light of God. And if we just get out of the way, it goes away. Thanks for being here. Of course, I would spend time elaborating more. I'm just pointing out that it's so simple, people actually get turned off by that, by somebody explaining it in such a simple way. But that's the ticket, guys. There's nothing to fight. There's nothing to snuggle with. The shadow is not real. The shadow is only there because I'm in the way. When I move, it disappears. So how am I going to snuggle with it? It's a shadow. How am I going to hold it, embrace it, give it a voice? Hold on. There's a light shining on me, and I can, maybe you can see it, make a shadow, on myself here. When I make a shadow, here's me. I cast a shadow. Am I falling in love with that shadow? Should I'm going to kill that shadow. Doesn't seem to do any good. The shadow's just sitting there. It doesn't exist. As soon as you move out of the way, it's gone. So this is what A Course in Miracles means by when you're dealing with, the past or something that seems to have power or whatever it is, even hurtful people. He's using the metaphor there saying, if you turn on a light, darkness disappears. That's how you deal with darkness. Turn on a light. It's kind of a Buddha-like concept too. But you just turn on the light. Rational thought. A person that walks around going, but Michael doesn't know what he's talking about because my shadow's a really bad shadow. There must be more of you in the way because the more you get in the way, the darker the shadow is going to look. The denser I am, the darker the shadow. And so somebody's going to say, well, you don't understand. Mine terrifies me, mine bothers me. And that's called being afraid of your own shadow, where we get that figure of speech. You're afraid of your own shadow. Yes, we have the nighttime boogeyman kind of, thing. You're afraid of your own shadow, meaning you're seeing images on the walls and all that. But what are those images? What are those images? The great Alfred Hitchcock, which I've never seen any of his movies, or I don't think I've seen horror movies for that matter, but he's famous for not even showing you an actual thing, but alluding to it, giving you the idea that it's there. And then that's enough to have terrified people in his era. So it's that. The shadow is an effect. It's not a cause. It's a symptom. The symptom of, oh my gosh, there's a shadow of a tree on my blinds in my room. So I'm scared because it looks like a creature, because it has this, look, it even has claws, but it's just twigs. They're just twigs, branches. So what are you going to do with it? Love the tree. I'm going to just love it. Hello, tree, tree branches and shadows of tree branches. Or I'm going to go and cut those down tonight and show them a thing or two. The truth is, if you just look out the blinds and recognize those are clearly tree branches, the power of it seems to go away again and again. Or if it's a shadow in my room, turn on the light, it's gone. Turn on the light. I'm not trying to be so simplistic that I'm boring you here. I'm just trying to say, we turn on the light. What is the shadow self? And instead of just saying it's nothing, so goodbye, thanks for being with us, let me say something very important that you can apply still, is that when I'm telling you there's a part of me that self-sabotages, that's what we generally mean when we say that's the shadow self. But who's that? Where is it? How do I find it and talk to it, work with it? It doesn't exist. So when you go and bemoan the shadow and overly give it a voice, you're just giving a voice to a mask of your ego. The ego is the only actual culprit behind it all. It's the devil made me do it idea. So what I need to do is, how much power, voice do I want to give to a shadow, a mask, a puppet of the ego? Why don't I just do my work on my ego? Oh, well, the ego is the shadow. Actually, the shadow is just a mask of the ego. It's an aspect of the ego. But if you work on the ego, you're uprooting this whole thing at the source. So one of my takes is to, work on this stuff at the source, to just not get caught up in all the right, wrong, dualistic stuff. God's not about duality. So God's not saying the shadow needs to be embraced nor killed. God's saying, well, turn on the light. Let's just expose truth, and then we don't have to have a conversation about the shadow. So I hope it's not sounding like overly simplistic or disregarding of it, because if somebody comes to me and says in a private session, Michael, I'm doing some shadow work and it's bringing up such and such, I don't think I've ever, and if I did, it was rare, said, the shadow's an illusion. Why are you talking to me about this? I would never do that to a person. If that's where they're at, fine. I think it's great. I'm going to listen to them at their level. But technically, if you told me you must do shadow work or you can't wake up, I'm going to tell you, shadow work is barking at the moon. The creature that looks up and sees that thing and starts barking at it, the old saying. There's a tarot card that has the dog barking at the moon too. But, you're barking at the moon. It means you're not going to get anywhere. Kind of where they also come up with barking up the wrong tree. The dog chases a critter up a tree, but it's the wrong tree. So it's kind of, it is a meta, that saying comes from, you're not making any sense. You're barking up the wrong tree. You're blaming the shadow, but it doesn't exist. It all means the same thing. So, people into shadow work, they don't like it when someone says there is no shadow. It's just you're in the way of God's light. And And there really isn't a light brighter than God, obviously. But in this universe, there's the sunlight as a metaphor. So when you stand in the way of the sun, you cast a shadow. Now make it a spiritual principle we're talking about. So what is this? If you're standing in the way of the sun, you cast a shadow, and the sun is a metaphor, the sunlight is a metaphor of God's light, then on earth, my shadow is standing in the way of God, of the light of the sun. But spiritually, what is it called when I stand in the way of God's light? Not a shadow, but an ego. So spiritually, when I get in the way, I have an ego. Cosmologically, environmentally, on earth, when I get in the way of sunlight, I cast a shadow. Meaning, the shadow is the material version of the spiritual version of the ego. Also, it's an image of, it's a reflection of the ego. So, do shadow work if you want. You could also do work directly on the ego. How, where, wherever you want. I mean, A Course in Miracles is all about, looking at, exposing one's ego, learning to say, well, I'm doing a lot of spiritual work, so I don't have an ego. Forget that. I'm going to fight my ego. See, you're still doing the same thing as shadow boxing. You're fighting your ego. You're fighting your shadow. It's the same. You're fighting something that ultimately doesn't have power. So don't try to kill your ego, nor your shadow. But don't try to play games and love it. Because all you're trying to do is seduce it so that it's not so mean to you and it doesn't want to be nice. So you say, well, what am I going to do? I'm trying to be so nice to my ego or my shadow, and it's still giving me fits, it still causes me self-sabotage. I even bought a doll and called it my shadow or my ego, and I pet it every night. So, like you're trying to pacify some demon that haunts you, and it doesn't work. These beings, these thoughts, these concepts like ego have no intention of liking you. The closest they can come is to pretend to like you, only to then mess with you. And that sounds like a really weird thing to some people. But what I'm saying is the ego is created out of fear. So it doesn't know what love is. And you say, well, then I should give it love. Actually, there's no it. There is no ego and shadow. They're shadows. They're just air. You know what I mean? They're nothing. They're nothing. They're just concepts. The shadow cast is just physics. It's not a thing. It's not an actual thing. It's just looking like a thing. You stood in the way, so it cast a shadow. So, it's even less real than air. And if you start talking to me about, I need to have a better relationship with the air because I don't want it to not like me. I'm going to pet the air. Man, I think you need therapy, big time. Well, the shadow's actually less real than the air because the air you can call an element. The shadow's only there because for a moment you're in the way. Air is there anyway, but the shadow's only there because something's making it as though there is a thing and it's not actually there. So I would say work on the ego, work on, my core self. And, that's going to disperse the low self-worth that the shadow, the mask of the ego called the shadow, seems to be casting in my life. That's all that's happening. When you say I have self-sabotage, all you really mean is, man, lately I've been noticing the effects of my shadow, which is my ego, in my life. So when you blame the shadow and you make it too personalized, you're actually trying to avoid getting to the root. So let's talk ego. Let's talk ego is the part of me that was created after I thought I might be separate from God and felt then afraid, which I can't go into that philosophical concept right now, but that's where it came from. I thought I might separate, then I felt afraid, and to cover my tracks, I created an ego, and I told my ego, I'm terrified. The ego was created out of fear and is not capable of love. Now, if you think that still sounds like it's a creature that I'm trying to destroy, like pitchfork it like it's the devil and Archangel Michael needs to put a sword through it or whatever, no, because there's not an it that I'm telling you to destroy. I'm saying when you turn on the light and learn to love and forgive as best you can, it starts fading, not dying, fading. Why does it fade? Because it has lack of work. It has no place in you. It has no place to root itself. So it fades. It doesn't die, and you don't need to kill it. But you can't love it either, because there's nothing to love. It doesn't exist. So when you start to see it for what it is, it just starts to fade. It doesn't actually scream, "I'm melting." It doesn't do that. It just fades. It will seem, though, like it will fight before it'll go. But there's not an it that's fighting. It'll seem like there is an it that's fighting. And that whole thing is me. The ego is in me. God is in me. The fight is in me. Letting it go is in me. All possibilities are right here within me. Which one am I addressing? Which one am I feeding? Like the two wolves fighting. Which one will win? The one I feed. The one that gets the strongest and is emboldened enough to rise and fight and be strong, bigger, badder, and defeats the other. So it's the one I feed. So as I learn to see things as they really are, that's a metaphor of the light coming on. And as the light comes on, the darkness fades. So that's really how it goes. But it'll look like it's fighting on its way out. Just an aside. The children that had visions in Medjugorje, Yugoslavia, for several years, they were having visions with Mother Mary, said something once, and it was so in alignment with Jesus in A Course in Miracles. They saw Mother Mary, and she told them something that you read in the Course, but different terminology. Why? Catholic, non-Catholic, just different brains, programs. So what was said was, one of the children was shown like an image of hell. And this child, this poor girl having to say this, but this girl, she screams and cries and, no, Mary, this can't be true. Why would God ever allow people to suffer in hell like this? And it's so brilliant. Mary, who's showing her a hell as though it's a tangible place, because that's the mindset of that culture, or the thoughts or whatever, the beliefs of that religion or faith. And Mary says, God would never want these people in hell. They're only here by choice. Pretty cool, pretty amazing. If there's a hell, someone would have to choose it. Even Mother Mary, the matriarch of many religions, has told us now, only by choice. Oh, cool, because dang, there are other religions, or I once thought, any of us, I thought you got thrown there just no matter what. Choice. That's amazing to hear that from Mary. So thanks, Mary. Another thing she then tells a child once, she says, "Oh, Mother Mary, how do we deal with evil? It seems so strong." And it's so cool. This is the one that especially aligns with the Course. Mary says, "I need to tell you, child, evil exists, but it's fading. Bad news is it's fighting harder to stay alive." So in her terminology, their terminology, she's using a devil, evil does exist. And don't take that too literally, and then you can bridge it, reconcile it to other thought systems. Evil exists, ego exists, fear exists. Just look at it that way. It does exist, but my point, whether you believe in it being a devil, an ego, or an evil, or even just a dark self, shadow self, whatever. Let's say for a moment it exists. What's more important than it existing in whatever name is that we're hearing from such a great source. It's fading. Its power over mankind is fading. Well, it sure as heck doesn't look like it, Mary or anybody else. Look at this world. So she already countered with that. She already countered that with saying, but it's fighting harder to exist. Which makes total sense. God, every sci-fi movie knows that, right? Every creature you try to kill, it's going to fight harder to stay alive. It's where we get those ideas. The desire to survive. You can be trying to pet a dog, but if it's a wounded dog, it's going to bite because it's going to try to survive and it thinks you're trying to hurt it. If it thinks you're trying to hurt it, it's going to bite for its survival. Similarly, something good or bad, good or evil, is going to want to survive. And so the shadow self has no intention of you just shining light and disappearing. The ego self has no intention of just disappearing. But the only way to get it to disappear is doing this. Turn up the light. Become a healthier and healthier person. Don't fight it. Don't befriend it. There's no it. What we're really saying is the it is you, a part of you, a belief in you that you are less than divine. It's all it all is, the God, the ego, and the shadow. You turn up the light by acknowledging, accepting, and living as though you have light in you, and the other will disappear. Am I saying you never should do ego work or shadow work? No, you can do those. But don't forget the light work. The shadow work, ego work, whichever you want to call it or choose to pursue by name, is again learning to see our frailties, learning to see where we react, how we react. And let me say this because it's so important. We keep trying to rush towards enlightenment and Christ, or towards ascension. And Christ that is in charge of our awakening and our ascension is telling us, but we're not listening. Too many of us aren't listening. It says, I don't want you to run towards enlightenment or ascension. What I'm asking you to do is actually stay on earth, meaning don't try to run towards enlightenment or ascension. I want you to stay in your day-to-day life. I don't mean stay stuck life. I'm saying stay on planet Earth and do your work there instead of I can't wait till I get out of here. Do your work there. I'm asking you to bring more light so the shadows or ego disappears. It just needs light. Instead of us saying, God, get me out of here, help me ascend so that I can get out of this dark, shadowy world, he's saying, encounter, God is saying, it's saying, would you mind if I give you another plan? You would help me and everyone else if you pursued a different plan. I have a plan for salvation, and it is that you don't get ascended, which is like reaching enlightenment in a way. I want you to become like a bodhisattva, as it's called in some traditions, which is you could go and ascend, but instead you could really, be a spiritual warrior. Go back to earth or stay on earth and do your light work. If you do that, man, you're going to speed up the whole enlightenment for everybody. Would you do that? And true light workers say yes. Yep. Not always easy. It doesn't always make sense to say yes, because it does make sense to say, I'd sure like to be out of here. But to say, oh, dang it, yeah, if that's what's needed, because God, the number of people it'll help, the good karma, it makes me strengthen my beliefs and what was theory is now becoming a reality. So there's a lot of beauty to it. So think about that. Just, don't be afraid of your own shadow. Stand, and your shadow could be self-sabotage with partners. Don't run away from partners. Christ is saying, I don't want you to neither run towards nor away from. I want you to stand where you are and be the light and see the partnerships for what they are. The ones you thought had power over you, turn up your light and look at them again. Oh my God, that wasn't always an evil, bad person. They're just people. They're souls that have forgotten who they are. So I don't have to run away from nor to addictions. He's saying, don't hate your addictions. I know some of you love being addicted. Some of you are like, it's not right, I'm going to fight it. And believe it or not, Christ is saying to us, I would actually rather you not hate it and run from it to be a better person, nor do I want you to embrace it and do it. What I want you to do is stand and be the light, shine your light, and I'll show you what's really happening here. I'll show you that there are layers. This addiction doesn't have the power over you that you think it does. The loss of that person in your life doesn't actually have the power. Yes, it does. I would feel cold if I didn't feel total loss and devastation and that I don't want to ever live again. And God's going to say, well, let me show you. Let's turn up your light. When you turn up your light, all of a sudden you go. The shadow includes veils. And when I turn up my light, there's no veils because my light just shines right through the veils that I thought were there. All of a sudden I go, it's you. I thought you died. They're like, who told you that? I'm right here. But why didn't I see you? Well, apparently someone didn't have the light up enough to shine through the veil that seemingly was there. So we do our work, man. We do our work, and we, do our part, and we shine the light, and everything just starts to change. There actually, is no shadow other than us the effect of us standing in the way of God's light. It's as simple as that. How do you deal with the shadow? Get out of the way. How do you get out of the way? Stop having judgments. That's what getting out of the way means. Stop trying to control everything and stop having judgments. And that's what you do to get out of the way. It's kind of like getting out of the way is almost like the word trust as opposed to control, which are sort of opposites. So just, think of the concept of doing that more often. Things that sabotage our life start to fade. Things that seem to limit our life. The things that seem to bring back, oh God, here it comes again, that old pattern with money or whatever, things that just haunt you, you're afraid of your own shadow, things that haunt you. So the shadow seems like it haunts us. Haunting means it keeps coming back saying boo. It startles me, it catches me off guard. Well, guess what? If you turn on the light and you see yourself, what could catch you off guard when you see everything? Well, they were hiding behind that. There's no thing to hide behind. Everything is illuminated. There's no density. There's no dense things for it to hide behind because there's no density in me. As I become part of the light, everything just, is exposed. And of course, there's no lack of opinions out there, books, techniques, and so on to work on the shadow. And somebody out there could say, who does this guy think he is? Acting like he knows. Well, again, find a different channel, if you like, then we're all happier. But if you have that thought or hear that thought from somebody, who does this guy think he is? This isn't like I'm sitting here just going, I think my opinion is going to challenge someone else, because that's dualistic. I'm going to fight someone else's opinion. I'm not interested in anybody else's opinion. God says, just shine the light and the truth comes. So I don't have to come up with an opinion to fight an opinion. I don't have to say I'm right. I don't know. Let me just go to God and find out. I don't mean like a megalomaniac dictator or cult leader that says, I'm going to go to God, as their eyes are kind of, oh, I'm going to go to God and tell you the truth. No, I'm saying you and I right now, the best way we can learn things on earth is often through metaphor. So let's just try a metaphor, which I already covered, but on earth, what is a shadow? Just ask. Jesus says in A Course in Miracles, when I told you to be as children, what I meant was ask questions the way children do. Like, what is that? So he's saying, so just ask. Or Buddha calls it rational thought. Just kind of walk through and dismantle things that seem so powerful or seem so confusing or complex that we can't deal with them. He says, just use rational thought. Calm down. So let's do that right now. Michael isn't right. Michael isn't wrong. Let's just find out the truth. Forget who you label it to or call it right or wrong. Let's forget right or wrong. Truth, just the truth. What is the truth about the shadow? Very simple. It's right. It needs to be killed. I don't have any interest in that. The truth about it. Metaphors, parables, the way ancients taught things. What is the shadow? Sunlight, shadow on the ground is coming from something being in the way. I wonder what that could symbolize. Maybe also shadow on earth is the same as ego on the spiritual level. And I thought I was supposed to fight my ego, resist my ego, destroy the voice of that ego. No, what do you do with shadows? If I really want the shadow or the ego to disappear, I just need to get out of the way. What if I turn up the light? But if I'm still in the way, it still didn't help. There's only one way to deal with the ego. Get out of the way. I mean, is it just me? Am I crazy here? It sounds like that's the way to deal with it. And sometimes the best answer is the simplest answer. My God, man, people just overly complicate things. Again, because you can get famous and wealthy writing books on things that people don't really want to know the answers to. And that's the trippy part. That's why so many things exist. That's why you have dualistic stuff in politics and in sciences because they don't really want the answers, because they would go to God if they want the answers. So they're going to have an opinion that fights another opinion, and everybody gets wealthy off of that. Everybody gets famous. Somebody's theory against that other guy's theory, and it goes on and on and on. So it's just us getting in the way. So for God's sakes, man, we can stop creating so many things on the false versions of it. If I just asked you guys, I could ask a 10-year-old, show them what it is, light, shadow, something causing the shadow, and I say, now, what's the trick? 10-year-old, how do I make that shadow disappear? Any ideas? They would say, well, I bet if you move your hand, it's not there anymore. I mean, a 10-year-old could figure that out. But people are going to be adults and not get it. That doesn't make sense to me. So please consider what I'm saying here about the shadow. Today is not as much steps 1, 2, and 3 per se, although I said some of that, on doing something here. Part of it's just exposing the truth about the topic so that you are more so educated, eyes wide open, masters, teachers of this topic. Do I think a lot of people are going to now say, well, now that Michael cleared it up, we can stop doing seminars on the dualistic aspects? No, I don't, because they don't want to know the answer. Do I think everybody you talk to, will say, wow, that's great? Some of them might. Some aren't interested because they're invested in that particular kind of work, the dualistic work. But you and I can know because we're open to knowing higher things. So I appreciate you being there because you help me bring out these answers instead of having them just in my mind and knowing them. I get to share them, and that feels good. And when we share things, they integrate to a new level. So you help me reach higher states of consciousness just by being there. What looks like a little dot on a phone recording this, but it's actually people that gain from it and request it. So I'm gaining by your being a vessel to receive it. And you're gaining, if you like this, by my sharing it. And if you don't like it, you might gain by saying, well, this doesn't work for me, and check out other sites where they're sharing things you can enjoy or appreciate or whatever. So I pray that has all made sense. But lastly, remember there are a couple steps that I did share though. So watch over this to kind of see a little bit. And some of it involves forgiveness. Forgiveness, choosing not to let resentments linger because it causes density, which then casts a shadow. How cool is that? I mean, it's clever for me to say, just get out of the way and you don't cast a shadow. It's clever and cute, but what does it mean to get out of the way? Well, you just move. Okay, what does that mean? How do you move psychologically and spiritually out of the way of your judgments casting shadows? You thin out the density of those judgments. You thin them out a little at a time, and eventually they're gone. And just like this body is dense, it can cast a shadow, but just like Jesus could beam in and out of a room, by the same token, this body is dense, but the more I turn into a light body, which I and we all are doing more and more, the more we turn into a light body, density doesn't hit anything. There's no density for it to hit and block its ability to shine where it's shining. So God's light, it's like in the book of Revelation when it says, now at the end, when everybody starts ascending and waking up into who they really are, they'll live for a while with peace on earth, and they will not need any light of the sun and moon because God will be our light. Oh, you mean it'll shine from somewhere? No, it'll be our light in ourselves. You won't need a sunlight to see in the night because there won't be a night. There'll just be light. We won't have dualities of sun and moon. We won't have a this and that and a, like someone, hate someone. There'll just be the light, the love, the presence of God. It's an amazing thing. It's hard to explain the physics of love because in love, there's only light. If I'm totally in love, a state of love in my mind towards you, towards all people, then the light shines so bright I can't see their shadows, let alone my own, right? Because we're not just talking about our shadow. When my light shines brightly enough, it's kind of like, God, that's weird. Is that you? You're thinking sometimes when you look at people, I thought I didn't like you, but yet you don't look like the person I didn't like because your mind is changing and they look different. It's weird. I just remembered one time I was in high school and I had a Letterman jacket on because I played soccer a bit. Never got real into things heavy duty, but I enjoyed it. Not the sport per se. In those days, in my days of soccer, it was new to my area and it was new to our school. And it was kind of funny because there's the football players, exercise, shaved heads. Basketball players, short hair, wear ties on game day. They all the athletes had their thing, like stringent, like almost military in a way, right? Which is good. It was discipline. It was good for them. Soccer players were mostly stoners. We were the ones that didn't have to cut our hair, and we didn't have to do anything practically. For us, it was really, we didn't even work out. It was just a joke, but yet we won the championship in our area. Anyway, we're doing this, and I have a Letterman jacket for it. And other coaches, hated the soccer players because they represented being out of control. And the guys are stoners. They don't care. They don't show up. It's like a bad comedy. You expect Bill Murray to be our goalie or something. It's one of those things and so you go, well, okay, but the coaches hated us. Who do you guys think you are, calling yourselves athletes, wearing Letterman jackets? You don't deserve it. So one day, I'm standing near in the gym and with my Letterman jacket, and this coach walks up to me and says, "What are you doing wearing that Letterman jacket? Take it off." And I said, "Well, it's mine. I'm not going to take it off." "Get out of it. It's not yours. Take it off." And I'm like, "This is my jacket." And he's like, "You're not a Letterman." And for that matter, in high school, there's almost no such thing as a 3-year, because it's a 3-year school. In our area it was. It's at a 4 for some schools. 3-year school, and you don't usually have 3-year Letterman because you're lucky to even get a Letterman once or maybe twice. So somebody that's a Letterman 3 years in a row, it's like unheard of. I was a Letterman 3 years in a row because there were no other people older. We were all 10th grade when we got into the soccer team, and we went to 11th grade and we went to 3rd. So we lucked out. 3-year Letterman, that only ticked him off even more. So he's saying, take it off, it's not yours. And then, believe it or not, another coach walked by and said, "No, that's his. He's a Letterman." Now here's the response of this coach, believe it or not. "Really? Swear to God," he said this. "I'm going to have to treat you differently now. I didn't know you were a Letterman." He was admitting that he was rude to me, not just that day. He was admitting that walking by him, there's a scorned look and rudeness that just came out of him. And yet, I'm going to have to look at you differently. That's a really kind of a sick, sad, weird story. But using that as just a launching point to say, we can see people differently for different reasons. Sometimes, well, you were nice to me. Sometimes I never liked you, but I was in line at the store and you helped pay the bill for me, so now I'm going to like you a little more. I've had that happen many times in my life where somebody just decided to shift their opinion, and I think it probably happened to you too, whether you know it or not. But my main point was, when you see from a mind of light, it does actually change the way you see people, not because you now were bought, because they were Letterman. They didn't buy your love because, oh, well, you let me in traffic, so now I'm going to like you, which is still better than nothing, but it's still got a condition to it. When we turn on the light in our minds and for no action on their part, no change on their part, to be able to still see them differently and think to ourselves, how is it that I ever thought anything but something holy about you? And the challenge with this, guys, is that on earth you're going to say, well, that can't be done. Some people are just rude and mean, until the light is turned up enough. When I turn up my light enough in my mind, and enough of us turn up the light in our minds, believe it or not, there will be no creature that can hide beneath a rock and act slimy. The light will be too bright. There's an adaptation in the animal kingdom. Things became creepy crawly to represent our creepy crawly thoughts. Once upon a time, there were no animals that could bite or sting. They were created as we fell more and more into dense, fear-based consciousness, and then they came about, believe it or not. So our consciousness can change anything. The light on, shadow gone. More light on, ego gone. None of them having to be killed, destroyed, or loved to death, or loved affectionately, pet, to death or something. They just disappear. You don't have to do anything. I need do nothing but just shine the light of God, be the light of God, and all that is unlike that light will disappear into the light. Okay? And anything you may be struggling with, past, present, future, please remember the priority of take it to God. Bring it to God and let God's light shine on it. You are never alone in anything you deal with. The light of God is with you. The light of Michael Mirdad is with you. The light of other people watching is with you. We're all in this together. Absolutely. So just allow the love in and let it change you. Listen to these things. They're mostly free. Listen to them. Watch other things that inspire you and lift you. Don't let yourself stay stuck ever in darkness, aloneness, hurt, betrayal, or whatever. See it, cry it, scream it if you must. That's fine. Process it, counsel it. Then give it to God and let it be replaced. Always let it be replaced with something else. But remember, whatever's going to replace it, you can only get something to replace it proportionately to how much room you make for that new thing. And the room you make is by letting things heal and go. All right? Peace be with you. Thanks for being with us again. Bye-bye.